Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are around the world. Welcome to a safe space between us. I'm your host, Kieran, and today we have a lovely guest called Lauren Rose. Lauren, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm brilliant, thank you. Thanks for coming on, really appreciate it. And thank you for taking up your time, obviously in the different time zones. Lauren, just before we start about your story, etc., please just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and then we can start with your story.
Sure. I'm 43. I'm a wife and mom. I live in Dallas, Texas, USA, and my daughter's 8. I've been married for 16 years, and I live with chronic pain and depression, anxiety, and PTSD.
Okay, that's great. We get talking about the PTSD. I suffer with PTSD as well. So talk to us, take us back all the way to the start when mental health or chronic pain or disabilities affected you, and obviously talk us how your upbringing was, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So the anxiety and the depression started when I was about 8. I didn't know that there was anything wrong with how I was feeling. I didn't know it wasn't normal because that's just, I was 8, I was a kid. I just thought, I guess everybody feels this way.
Yeah.
And the chronic pain started when I was 15 in the form of migraines and just really severe headaches. And I didn't get I didn't get help for any of it until I was actually in my 20s. So I was raised in a house where we weren't supposed to talk about our feelings unless they were happy feelings. So basically, my dad would always just tell me, "You're just a child. You have no reason to be sad or angry or whatever the feeling was that he didn't like." So I kept the anxiety, the depression, and even the pain completely to myself until I was in my 20s and out on my own, and realizing, okay, these things aren't normal. I don't have to live with these issues every single day. There is help available.
No, I totally get that, and a similarity of growing up at such a young age and then not talking about it or doing anything about it at a later age. I totally relate. How did that make you feel? So all those years from 8 up to 20 odd, how did that make you feel like during your school time, making friends, and how was your circle? Well, obviously you said at home you don't talk about it, but what about outside, like at school and stuff like that?
I was extremely shy. So I wouldn't really talk to anybody. I didn't have any friends at school in my later elementary years or in my middle school years at all because I was just so shy. I would go to the playground and I would write poetry or I'd read a book. And because I just I always felt invisible at home. So it just carried into my self-esteem and my ability to make friends and socialize.
No, I bet that was really hard, and no one should really go through that. So I'm sorry you had to, like, your upbringing was like that. So talk to us. So how did you do at school and stuff like that? And did anything affect you through your mental health, like your feelings and stuff, with your education?
So I did really well in school, but that was really because the only reason my dad seemed to love me was because I was smart and got good grades. So I worked really hard at school and I did pretty well. And I think my mental health journey did start to really kind of come to a head when I was 15. I developed an eating disorder, which is, people know or is about lack of control and not because I ever thought I was overweight or anything like that because I was very underweight. But it's just all about a lack of control. And that was one thing that I could have control over. So my parents, eventually figured that out and sent me to therapy. And I don't know that therapy helped me that much because I hated going back then. Like in my adult life, I like going to therapy because it's my choice, right?
Yeah.
I get to talk about what I want to talk to, but I didn't want to talk to her at the time. It's really just in my high school years, my last couple of years of high school, I developed some really close, good friendships. And I think that got me out of the eating disorder more than anything else.
No, that's great. Yeah, I'm glad you got some friends at the time and that helped you because obviously, like you say, as a kid, you don't really want to talk to a counsellor and stuff. Now we can talk about what we want and what we choose to talk about. So just when I was reading your bio, you mentioned obviously, I don't know if I'm skipping many years here, but in 2017 regarding you had to stop to work. Have I skipped too much? Is there more before?
No, that's perfectly fine. So the migraine started about age 15, but then when I was 35, I started having neck pain. And then when I was 36, I started having really bad low spinal pain. And I worked through it and pushed through it, wore a back brace every day because it really hurt to walk. I went home from work a lot early. I worked from home as much as I could. And after about 10 months, I was also getting steroid injections to try to help the pain. And I just got a set of injections that made it so much worse that I tried going to work for one day and I realized I can't do this anymore. So I went on short-term disability for which is 6 months,
Yeah.
and I got some more steroid injections. I did physical therapy. I was trying to get better, but instead what happened was my pain spread from just my neck and my low back to the rest of my body. And it's because I've got inflammatory arthritis and degenerative arthritis and spinal degeneration, which I found out about those when I was in my almost 36, 35. And so those started really flaring up in all my joints. And then I developed fibromyalgia while I was on short-term disability. So then I not only had the joint pain, I started having really bad muscle pain.
Mm.
So after 6 months, I was worse than when I had originally gone on short-term disability. So I could not go back to work. And it was devastating to me because I loved my job. I loved my company. I loved the people that I worked with. And so I spent about the next 2 years in a really deep depression. I was grieving. I was grieving the loss of not only my job and my career, but my ability to do things around the house. I was grieving my loss of a sense of purpose in life because we really put a lot of our identities into what we do for a living, and we don't have that anymore. I was thinking, what is my purpose on this earth for a couple of years?
No, I get that. I totally get that. During that period of time, though, did you seek any support? Did you talk about it, or did you just keep it in and just suffer without talking or seeking any support?
At that time, I was just suffering because I'd lost my job, so I'd lost my health insurance and took some time to get transferred over to my husband's, and he was kind of in and out of jobs for a couple of years when I couldn't work. So just a lot of different things. I basically just suffered, and for me, my grief came out as depression. Some people it comes out as anger. Some people avoidance. I was depression and avoidance, I guess. And I pretty much stayed in bed for 2 years. I had a 5-year-old daughter. She was 4 and 5 at the time. And, I got up just to take care of her and just do basic things for her, but I didn't do really much else. I was very isolated during that time because I was going through this grieving process. And I didn't realize that's what it was at the time that I was grieving.
Yeah.
I just knew I was depressed. So I wish I'd known it was grieving. That way I could have really leaned into the grief and gotten help and journaled more about it. Instead, I just really suffered from the depression itself.
No, I get that. It's just very hard. I know you say you wish you knew what you're going through, but if you've not been through that exactly before, it's very hard to understand what the hell's going on. In that period of time, though, did people understand um, why what was going on, or did you get people making comments, or how did people treat you in that period of time of you just like being in bed, getting up to look after your daughter, and then going back to bed? How did people treat you?
So if anybody had comments, they never said them to me,
Mm.
which is good. I have a very supportive husband and a very supportive, just small family unit. So, I think my daughter probably didn't understand why I was in bed all the time. And she wanted to play a lot. And so I would sometimes get up and try to honor that for a few minutes. But as far as I know, people didn't say anything. They really were supportive of me.
No, it's good to hear. I'm glad. Glad. So, talk to us how you come out of that. So, after those couple of years of going through that, must have been tough, how did you find yourself coming out of that moment?
So one day I just was looking at my daughter and I realized I did not want her to grow up and remember me as the mommy who was always in bed, depressed and in pain all the time. That's not how I wanted my legacy to be with her. So I knew I had to do something different. So I started a book club at my church. We were reading this book called It's Not Supposed to Be This Way, which was exactly what I was feeling about my life. Like, this is not what I'd worked for and planned for. This is not what I've been, hoping for. And the the group helped me get out in two ways. One of them was, there was this lady, she owns a nonprofit that is dedicated to gratitude. So she encouraged me to practice intentional daily gratitude every single day, three things, whether I liked it or not, before I went to bed. And what that did was really got me appreciating things like, yes, it hurts me to walk. It causes me a lot of pain. However, I still have two legs and I can walk. And so I became grateful for things that I could do and the things that I did still have, instead of focusing on everything that I'd lost and everything I couldn't do and didn't have anymore. And the other thing that really helped me was realizing that my life didn't have to be over. I could take my life and make something new and beautiful out of it. And that's what I started doing. I started just really aching for other people who were in my similar chronic pain situation. So I joined a bunch of Facebook groups and forums, and I started connecting with other people who had chronic pain, who had mental illness, who had previous trauma. And I felt a lot of joy just connecting with them, encouraging them, giving them advice. And yeah, and then I read a statistic that 1 out of 5 people lives with chronic pain, and that's a worldwide statistic. That's
Yeah,
20,
I've seen
20,
that.
20% of our population. So
Crazy,
that's
isn't it?
what, yeah, it really is. And it's not something that we talk about very much. People with chronic pain and even, with mental illness, we don't talk about it much because we don't want to burden other people, right? We don't want to be a downer all the time. We don't want people to know how miserable we are most of the time. So we
Mm.
keep it all in, and it's been a very lonely journey. And
No, I can totally get that. And what we do, we come back to that topic because I love that bit of topic of why we don't talk about it. But just to rewind a little bit, because obviously reading your bio, and obviously only talk about what you're happy to talk about. I don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable. You discussed that you're a rape survivor and a survivor of verbal and physical, emotional, sexual, and spiritual abuse. Are you happy to talk about a bit more about that and what happened? As I say, you're entitled to go as deep as you want, but only if you feel comfortable.
sure. So when I was a late teenager, it started with, well, I guess it started before that. It started with verbal abuse from my dad. Um, I would definitely say he was verbally abusive when I was growing up. And then when I was 18, I had a cousin assault me and start abusing me for about a year. And then I met a guy and he was physically abusive towards me, and I was in that relationship for about 2 years. And then the spiritual abuse actually came from my mother, who, because I'm a Christian woman, and I always have been, and she used to use my spiritual beliefs against me. She would, if she didn't like something I was doing, she would try to use the Bible and Bible verses and things that I believed to cause shame in me, and it worked too. It it was really, really, painful, and it put a huge strain on our relationship. But she would use, things that I believed and just try to cause shame and guilt and pain in me. So that's kind of a summary of all of that stuff.
No, sorry you had to go through all that. Just by chance, what's your relationship with your parents now?
So my dad passed away almost 2 years ago. Um, I I hated him. I mean, almost until about a year before he died. And the only reason I stopped hating him was because I knew he was dying, and I knew that it wasn't going to do me any good to hold on to anger and pain that he'd caused me once he had passed away.
Mm,
Now, with my mother, things are not bad right now. For the past few years, things have been pretty good because she is behaving appropriately and she's not doing things to purposefully hurt me. So right now things are okay, knock on wood.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. Just we're all different. I get the feeling. I got the feeling, as you said, you hate your dad. I'm in similar now. Like my mum and dad still about. But I haven't spoke to them for 9 months now. And to be fair, I hate them. To be maybe I can come to terms just before anything bad happens, like you did with your father. But at the moment, to me, I don't have a mum and dad for a number of reasons. So I totally get that because I believe the older we get, we deserve to live our be happy, and forget or try and get over how we were brought up at times. So totally relate to that. So just talk to us a bit more about your chronic pain. How did you get into, like, obviously it hurts to be a mum podcast, talking about how to cope with chronic pain, and all things that. How did you get into all this kind of stuff?
So, how we were talking about how I had started connecting with other people who had chronic
Mm,
pain. And then I saw that statistic and I realized I'm not alone. It's been a very lonely journey it's been almost 30 years now, and it's been very lonely. But if that many people have chronic pain, then I felt like my new purpose in life was to encourage people with chronic pain and with mental health issues and with previous trauma. So I started a blog, and then pretty soon after that, I think the same month I really got into blogging, I decided to start a podcast, which is kind of unusual because I'm an introvert. So the thought of podcasting was pretty out there for me, but I knew I wanted to put good into the world. And a popular way to do that right now is podcasting. They're very popular. So I started It Hurts to Mom, first as a blog and then as a podcast, just because I want people to be encouraged and understand that they're not alone in their chronic pain, in their mental health journeys, or in their previous trauma journeys.
no, I love that. I love that. And that, so obviously, how long have you been doing your podcast and vlogs?
So it's been about 9 months, I guess, now.
Okay, and how's it all been going? You've been getting some. I bet you hear a lot of stories.
I do, because most of my podcast episodes have guests on them. So I have people who come on who live with chronic pain, and people who, like doctors who come on that deal with chronic pain. And they've all just got different perspectives and different lessons. And I think it's been going really well. I mean, I live in the United States, but podcast is active in 11 countries total, so 10 others, which I think is really cool that I've got that kind of reach and that people are caring enough to listen to what my guests have to say. I think it's really been really cool.
No, that's brilliant. And how is your chronic pain now? Like, how do you cope with it? What are your tools and coping mechanisms for yourself?
Sure. So I've got four big ones I'll just kind of sum up. The first one is talking to my friends and family about my chronic pain. So my daughter, I've been talking to her about it since she was about 3 or 4. And so this is the only mom that she really knows. I've had some sort of chronic pain her entire life. So we have conversations about it. I enlist help. So not just from, my husband and my daughter, but, I'm teaching my daughter to do things around the house. I use certain supplies, like if I need a wrist brace or a back brace or earplugs if I'm having a bad migraine and noise is bothering me. So I enlist any kind of help I can. I try to take care of myself, not only doing things that are fun, not only, eating right and I can't really exercise, but getting enough sleep. Um, I journal. I try to meditate. I try to do anything that's going to bring joy and peace to my body, and I try to avoid self-talk. I think that's a great form of self-care, is avoiding your negative self-talk. I can
Yeah,
I can acknowledge that I've got pain and I might feel like a bad mom, but I also have to acknowledge I'm doing the best I can. um, I also take care of myself by going to therapy. I'm in regular therapy and trauma therapy. I take my medications like I'm supposed to. That's a form of self-care. And I listen to my body. I pace myself. I modify my tasks. Like I can't stand up for very long, so I have to sit down to do all my chores, but that's okay because I can still do it that way. And, my last way that I kind of deal with having chronic pain is just trying to be present. So my daughter likes to play. She's 10, and I can play with her for maybe 15, 20 minutes, and she's perfectly happy. She doesn't care that I can't sit on the floor and play with her for an hour. She doesn't care if I'm lying on the couch playing a board game with her. I'm giving her the attention and showing her that I love her and that I'm doing the best I can. And so I think that's really the most important one, is just being present with your family, especially if you've got kids.
Yeah, totally love your attitude, because obviously, firstly, you've come to terms of, listen, I'm not a bad mum. I'm doing what I possibly can. I'm giving my daughter attention as physically and possible I can, and then she's happy, and I love that attitude because I'm guessing all that throughout your year you've blamed yourself or thinking you're a bad mum and that, and we all think we're bad parents at times and that, but one thing you mentioned there is not to be self-talk, negative self-talk, and talk. And I think that's massive what you said there because of I've been there where I'll look in the mirror and go, "Fuck's sake, Kieran, you're useless, Dad. You're useless. Sort your life out, blah blah blah." And do you know what? I thought it'd motivate me. It never did. It probably made me worse. Probably made me worse. So I totally get that. And anyone listening, try and if you are going to do talk or whatever, I find praising someone else, saying, be proud of yourself. You're beautiful. You're beautiful inside that and that, and then they might come back with a positive comment to you, and then it actually makes me feel a bit buzzing because I've actually praised someone to cheer them up, and they've returned it with a positive um, comment. So I love that totally. And what you're doing with your daughter, I totally get that. I do little things like letting my girls do my makeup. It just makes them happy. So I let them just do makeup, and then 10, 15 minutes when I'm shattered, they're happy because I look like a clown.
Yeah.
So talk to us more about your podcast. Where do you want to take your podcast? What's your aim with it? And obviously, just talk to us about certain, if you're able to, about any guests. You don't have to mention the guests, but obviously with us, we hear plenty of stories, and sometimes I find it when I log off a bit emotional, like to deal with. How do you cope with all the different stories you hear?
Well, all my stories end with some kind of advice or tip. So I don't focus on the negative parts of people's stories. I always focus on what advice they can offer my audience. So that's really one way, is not to get bogged down.
Yeah.
One of my favorite stories was with a lady who had 12 years of debilitating back pain that she healed on her own through mind-body connection work. And I'm really learning through my podcast that there's a huge relationship between our minds and our bodies.
Mm.
And our minds can play a huge role in our physical pain and discomfort. So and she was able to just completely heal herself. She has no pain now, which is amazing. But I've had lots of doctors on, and they talk about missing elements in the medical field. Like one lady came in and talked about, how spirituality of some sort, it doesn't have to be religion, but some sort of spirituality is missing in our medical field and in the holistic ways that we try to take care of ourselves. And I just had a lot of guests on I had one on just that I interviewed the other day, who is working with Congress to get some things done when it comes to, medications, like getting a better database of side effects from different medications. And it's called the Adverse Reactions Database. And she's trying to get a law passed where even if insurance denies a procedure that the doctor thinks is necessary, the doctor can do the procedure anyway. Basically, the doctor can overrule insurance, which I think is really cool. So there's a lot of people doing a lot of really cool things out there. And
No, that's good. That's good, and
yeah,
I'm sure they're all inspiring. As all guests on here. Just have a few questions to throw at you. Just personal views on mental health, as we were talking about just a while back. So first off, we might as well go back where we spoke about chronic pain, how high it is around the world, the population, and obviously mental health and stuff. What's your view? Obviously, we're in 2023. What's your view and opinion on why we don't talk about it much?
I think part of it is the stigma of it. I mean, I would say since COVID, it's gotten a lot better when it comes to talking about mental health because we all went through this collective trauma together, and it affected so many people in so many different ways that we can talk about it more. But like when I was growing up, if you had to be on an antidepressant, you were quote unquote crazy. There was something
Mm.
wrong with you. And so I think that's a big one. People are just, they don't want to be judged. They don't want to be looked down upon. They don't want to be looked at like something is off, something is wrong. You are broken. And I think with chronic pain, part of it is we don't want to be a burden to other people. And I think part of it is that people really don't understand the chronic pain that individuals go through. And a lot of times if you tell somebody you've got chronic pain, they'll immediately start saying, well, have you tried yoga? Have you tried eliminating sugar? And all they'll start giving advice. And a lot of us have tried a lot of those things already. It's like people don't hear us. You know, a lot of people think that people with chronic pain are lazy and unmotivated, and that's the farthest thing from the truth. It's just we do, it's a full-time job to live in a body with chronic pain and chronic illness. It is.
No, no, I agree. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
I suffer with chronic pain, and I totally agree with that. And it's just like I believe, just to return back to how you answer that, is like my personal views on why we don't talk about it. I think obviously you said it, the stigma is massive. I agree, it's got better because of COVID and stuff. But then, so even now, where I am in the UK, I believe if people hear that you're on certain tablets, they think straight away that you're in the asylum, you're the Joker, you're in the or something like that, and you're in a straitjacket or whatever. Um, and that stopped a lot of us talking. But at the same time, I think if a lot of us suffering in chronic pain, mental health, etc., if we can find that courage and use your platform, this platform, any platform to tell your story, because we all have a unique story, I think slowly, the more of us talking, we can break that stigma. The more we hide and don't talk about it and don't find that space that is supportive, and that's not a cliche about here, but it could be your one, it could be anywhere. Um, I think people would then realise, wow, people are actually talking now. Um, and all we can do from you, myself, and loads of other people I've spoken to is keep getting guests on talking about the struggles and that, and hopefully one day when I get my safe space between us private jet, we can all meet up and go and celebrate of breaking that stigma.
Awesome.
But also, so with chronic pain, so I've got a thing called sarcoidosis, which is lumps on my lymph nodes, but it's gone into my bones, and the chronic pain I get not at night time, especially, it is just a joke. And like I say, I believe until people have suffered it themselves, they will never understand. They will never understand, and we can talk about it, we can educate them. I just think people won't understand until they've gone through it. How do you, like, obviously you've got medication, you've got your coping mechanisms and stuff. How do you cope with when people think or comment or treat you a bit different, thinking that you're lazy? Because I get that sometimes. You're just being lazy and stuff. How do you cope around with all that?
Luckily, I don't get that from my family. I'm a lot harder on myself than my family is on me. My husband's the one that reminds me not to to
Push
judge
yourself.
myself and
Yeah.
and to have self-compassion. So, but I think if like one thing that I worry about is using the handicap placard at the store. I'm just so worried that I look so young that somebody's going to say something to me. And I don't know how I would react in person because I'm very non-confrontational, but my go-to in my head is just reminding them that, my doctor thinks that I need it. So
Yeah, but the thing
that's
is, you
my
shouldn't
hope.
have to do that. I just think I had to say the other day, like a disability is not always visual.
Right.
It isn't always visual, and people need to understand that we're in 2023, and I'm really shocked that people are still not knowing that a disability isn't just what you might look like, or in a wheelchair, or wherever it is. I Joe Bloggs could around the street could be walking as normal, but he could have a disability. He could have ADHD, autism, or something like that. We don't know, and I think that's still the judgment around there and out here is quite harsh because, as I say, I've educated myself to realise the disability is not just visual; it's what's inside as well. So I think that's very harsh on yourself to say you feel like you had to say that, would say that. And unfortunately, that's how people would treat us at times. So I'm really sorry that you feel like that. But I do want to say, obviously, before I ask you one more question before we wrap up, I just want to say that you should be very proud of yourself of going through all that stuff you've gone through in life, especially your upbringing and stuff like that, to find a place to where you now know I'm not a bad mum, I'm not a bad person, I'm doing what I can physically possibly do, and that's all you can do, and not put too much pressure on you. And 1,000,000% your daughter will grow up knowing that you've been the best mum possible. So be very proud of yourself because we're very proud of you also. So well done.
Thank you. That's very kind.
No, anytime. Just the last message, which I'll pass you. So, to any listener out there who's struggling with chronic pain, mental health, or anything like that, and they're too a bit scared to talk at the moment, what would your message be to them?
Keeping it in just makes us sicker. So I started getting my headaches when I was 15 because I kept in all of my emotions, my thoughts, my ideas, my opinions, and I shut down because I was so shy and because I wasn't allowed to express myself. And I think that's what started me on this road with chronic pain and the migraines. And I say that because when I went into a 4-week inpatient pain recovery program, and we were very open talking about everything, and I actually started feeling better while I was there. But as soon as I got back into the real world, my headache started up again. I mean, like the next day. So being in doesn't help us, it only hurts us.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Thank you so much. Before we wrap up, there's a few comments here, so I'll just put them up on the screen. Unfortunately, don't say who they are, but I'll put there. So someone has put, I understand about fibro. It's a horrible thing to live with. So just talk about how you are coping with that. How are you coping with fibro? I can't
Very,
say the full
very
word.
difficult. Very fibromyalgia. Um, that's definitely a hard one because even like if I have an itch and I scratch myself too hard, I go, oh my gosh, that really hurt. It's the fibro acting up those nerves. And so I don't have anything at the moment besides medication that
Mm,
in maybe creams like CBD creams that I put on that
yeah.
make it a little bit better. I am trying something called PEMF. I think it's pulsed electromagnetic field. It's basically like a grounding mat, and it's supposed to basically reset your body's frequency, and it's supposed to help with pain, with anxiety, with PTSD, with sleep, all sorts of things. So I can't vouch for it yet, but I've read a lot of good things about it,
No, that's
including
good.
from our government.
No, please keep me in touch, informed how that goes, because if that's any good, I would love to pass it on to any members who's interested in that. So thank you. I can see Kerry Moore said practicing gratitude is so helpful and so misunderstood. It makes such a difference with regular daily practice. So that was obviously talking when you was speaking about giving yourself gratitude. So I'm glad someone else has related. Someone else has put, I had fibroids since I was 14 and my son was diagnosed at 11. Wow.
Wow.
Bernadette, I think you've been on a podcast. She says, hey, I have chronic pain. It's hard. Bernadette, again, I've been on Lauren's podcast. She's also been on mine. Amazing conversations. My back pain is getting better with mindfulness and meditation. I'm glad to hear, Bernadette. So just quickly talking about mindfulness and meditation, does that help you personally? Because obviously Bernadette's mentioned it here as well. Can that help here?
It can. I'm very new at it. I am still not great at the focusing because my mind likes to wander. But when I was in the hospital in that pain recovery program, people said that the two things that helped their pain the most were physical therapy and meditation. I mean, meditation helped a lot of people that I met in that chronic pain program. So our minds and our bodies have a lot to do with each other for sure.
Yeah, and I'll get a lot of we've had about 50 guests on, and every conversation, everyone says meditation. It's just every time I try it, I'm similar like you. My brain just wanders, but I'm going to try and stick out of it because everyone seems to say give it a try. And the last one, someone's put, I would try anything to get rid of this pain. So I'm sure that they have chronic pain as well. Yeah, so again, like you say, like people who've just commented, we're all suffering with chronic pain. So it's just crazy. Like, and this is what I say to any listeners out there, or anyone who feels, oh, chronic pain's not serious, and it's only a couple of people who suffer it. I think people need to do the research, and also not even doing the research, listen to the people who actually suffer with it, because I think those who suffered or suffer with something are the best people to give advice and explain how they suffer and what the pain is, for people to understand. For me, Lauren, I just want to say thank you so much for actually coming on Safe Space Between Us and sharing your story. Very inspiring lady, and I wish you the best of luck going forward. But I always try and keep in contact. Well, I always do keep in contact with every guest we come on. So I'd love to keep in contact with you, see how you're getting on. And I know this sounds like a cliche, but a safe space between us is also your space. Feel free to come back on any time or just on the page, check in or anything. And I'll definitely keep updated with your podcast as well. That's okay. I'll keep listening to it. And and hopefully we can support each other going forward.
That sounds great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on. Guys, thank you so much. And if you have any questions going forward, this podcast will stay, this is a live, but it'll stay on the page and on the YouTube channel for the foreseeable. So any questions you have, please comment and I can go back to Lauren. And if there's any direct questions for Lauren, I can go back and answer those questions if she's happy to answer them in the future. But I wish you the best of luck going forward and all the health as well. And thank you everyone for watching. I've been your host, Kieran. That's been our amazing guest, Lauren, and take care.